This week on the Baseline Podcast, with Josh out, Aaron Lynn from the Fifth and Goal podcast joins me, and we talk college football. Well, we talk about other things too, but mainly we focus on the Ohio State versus Notre Dame game. We break down the ins and outs of the game. We talk about what Ohio State did well, what they struggled with, and then we focus on to what does Ohio State have to do the rest of the season. We focus on some other teams throughout the country that are doing well, that maybe are some that are shocking us. And then we switch our focus to our power rankings and our Heisman watch and finish up by talking about some Detroit Lions and Cleveland Browns football. All that and so much more coming up on the Baseline Podcast. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Baseline Podcast. I'm Ben. That's not Josh. That's Aaron. Aaron, first off, we'll talk about Josh in a second, but Aaron Lynn, his back after, I don't know, it's been months since you've been on. So
it's been a hiatus.
So are you doing well? You're alive. You're well. Everything's going
I'm
well?
doing well. I'm alive. Football season's here. I don't know what it's like weather-wise, but it's here in Ohio. It's fall. It's beautiful. It's everything you could possibly want if you're a football fan. Cool weather, lots of games. We're approaching the point where, just to take you inside my mind, where my mind's at, Conference USA is going to start playing weekday games. So we're rapidly approaching the point where there will be live football every single day of the week. And that is a glorious time.
That is true. And the weather here is also nice and fall weather. It feels good. You walk out. I mean, it was hot a little bit, but we handle that. But anyways, for all of you knowing, this is not Josh's clone or, adaptation of Josh. No, Josh is actually away for this week. So we're like, hey, we're not going to go a week without an episode. So we said, let's call on the old guys over there at Fifth and Goal, the guys that have been around, it seems like, for 20 years. Maybe it's only been a few years, but feels like that. But speaking of Fifth and Goal, why don't you take a little moment here to talk about what's been happening? I know there's been a lot of changes since you've last been on. I know there's been a lot of things that have changed and what you guys are doing. Tell them what you're doing this fall and also what's going on with the platforms and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hang on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, sorry. I think I accidentally muted myself there for a second. I'm a real pro podcaster.
Pro.
So for those of you that don't know me or maybe haven't stumbled across my previous guest appearances here, my name's Aaron. I started a sports media organization, for lack of a better term, back
started
in
as a
2021.
podcast.
Started as a podcast.
And then kind of
it's called Fifth and Goal. So the podcast is still rolling along. Myself and a couple of my college buddies, we record every week and enjoy doing that, much like this podcast here. But we've branched out a little bit, especially during football season. So we've been very blessed to get some media credentials to football games. So a couple of weeks ago, I went to Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. I got to cover Indiana versus Louisville, which was really sweet. So everything from like a spot in the press box to write an article about the game and stuff like that. It's actual like field access and get some cool videos of stuff that's going on. So we've been able to do that at a couple different football stadiums. We've got some more of those games in the works. So if you're interested in seeing, hey, what does college football look like behind the scenes? We try to share that as much as we can. We're also on YouTube. We're trying to beef up our video game here in the next few months. So we do a little bit of everything, but really, Ben, like you and Josh, we're really just trying to bring the sports that we love and to kind of bring that love and share it to you, our fellow sports fans. And so we can enjoy in that together. So that's really kind of the purpose of what we do. And we've got a college football preseason magazine that at this point is a little bit outdated, but
it's also awesome.
But it's up on our website. There's previews for literally all 133 FBS teams. So we're pretty serious about our college football. We really like going in depth.
Or do you have no life, one of the two?
Well, that's a valid criticism. I choose to look at it like we just love college football so much, which is true. Both are true, but
and it's good. And I know, so where can you find you guys? I know you're on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, or X, whatever. I don't even know what we're calling it at this point.
Not X.
It's just Twitter sounds better.
It does. If you just search us on any of those platforms, you should be able to find us. fifthandgoalsports.com is kind of the hub for everything. So it'll give you the links to everything else that we have going on. But encourage you to check it out. If you listen to this whole podcast and you think, you know what I need more of this in my life, then do it. And listen to past episodes of this podcast, of course.
And I would also say too, is if people don't know, Aaron, myself, and actually his two other co-hosts, we actually all graduated the same year at university. We went to Cedarville University. Josh was a little bit older than us. He's an old guy. But yeah, we all went to the same university. Aaron and I actually met, and Johnny I actually met Johnny first, and then we all kind of just got to know each other throughout college. And I always knew Aaron was a Buckeye fan, which you could probably think where this show's going today. Not Florida. He wants to talk about Florida. But anyways, I wanted to thank Aaron for coming on, taking some time out of his busy schedule to come join us. So let's jump into it. Aaron, I know for me, college football season is one of those times where, I think growing up, as in Ohio, you watch Ohio State football, and then Sunday you watch the Bengals or the Browns. Those like the two teams you would watch, right? And I think as I've gotten older, I've focused more on the college game. I don't know about you, but I think that's just where I feel, I don't know, it's more connected. Maybe it's because the NFL has become so politicized that it's hard for me to watch. But for me, I love college football. And this past weekend might go down as one of the most electrifying, most entertaining, low scoring, but awesome games I've ever witnessed. But also just in general, the week of college football was awesome. I want to specifically look at the Ohio State Notre Dame game. We'll spend a bulk of our time here on this game. Before we get into the recap, what was your thoughts going into the game? Everyone knows on my thoughts. I shared them last week. What was your thoughts going into the game leading up to it?
Yeah, I had Notre Dame winning by 3. I thought this was going to be a close game. Obviously, you said it. I'm a Buckeye fan, have been for my entire life. You can see behind me, I got Buckeye stuff. This map behind me is a map of Columbus, like born and raised into that cult very early on, and happy to be here still. I was really concerned because obviously the game against Western Kentucky was a breath of fresh air in terms of the offense. That was obviously a concern. It's interesting being a Buckeye fan in 2023, because this year has been such a departure for what we're used to. We're used to putting up 50, 60 points on everybody.
Yeah.
And it's funny, if you take that Indiana game that was 21-3 or something like that.
23-3. Yeah.
23-3. If you take that same point margin and you beat Indiana like 42-20,
we're like,
we're shrugging our shoulders like, all right, cool. That was a normal win. But the fact that the offense looked bad, but then the defense is coming alongside and like really showing that they're strong, it's just weird. So I think it's been hard, and especially leading up to that Notre Dame game, it was difficult to really get a sense of what will this Ohio State team look like, because on Notre Dame's sideline, they've got Sam Hartman, who's been a quarterback since I think before you and I were born.
That's probably true.
In college, I think he's been in college for almost 30 years. And they've got a stable of running backs. They've got an elite offensive line. They've got some good weapons, and all of that remained true. And it was because of that I kind of was leaning towards Notre Dame. You've got basically not an actual freshman, but a freshman in terms of his playing time in Kyle McCord, going on the road in a environment that is desperate to see the Buckeyes lose. And I just thought, I just think that the veterans on that Notre Dame team will get the job done. And they were quite literally a dropped interception away from doing so. Yeah. But I am here and happy to say that the Buckeyes are 4-0.
Yeah. I was actually one that was probably a little more bold. I thought, going into the game, I thought, man, we're going to be able to run the ball. I think we're going to be able to pass the ball a little bit. I felt that the advantage was, hey, we got the offense, going. So I think I picked him, by like a 10-point victory or something around there, to be a little bit bigger margin. And to be honest, I think both teams could have won by 10 points. I mean, if you look at all the missed breaks that both teams had inside the 20, inside, the opponent territory. But now as we look at the game, I want you to just give your raw feedback of the game. You're obviously there watching. By the way, people don't realize I was watching this game at like 3 a.m. So I literally went to bed. I literally went to bed like right as the last drive was happening. And I think I ended up falling asleep during the last drive. So I ended up having to like rewatch the last drive to figure out what actually really happened.
Sure.
But I want to give you your raw feedback and kind of rank what you feel like Ohio State did and all that fun jazz.
Yeah, the defense was as good as advertised, Phenomenal. Which was impressive because, I mean, they were good against Western Kentucky, which was reassuring because Western Kentucky slings the ball everywhere, like Austin Reed and that offense. But you're getting a totally different feeling with this pro style Notre Dame.
Run, offense. pound and ground, basically.
My biggest takeaway was the defense, but it was that Jim Knowles is in year 2, and the difference between year 1 of Knowles' defense and year 2 is is night and day. And we can go in and break down the X's and O's of what that looks like. The fact that he loves running like 3 high safeties and all this stuff that would probably bore most of the audience to tears. So I won't go that far, but it's exactly what we saw when he was at Oklahoma State. Year 1, I think even year 2, I'd have to pull up the statistics, was not very good. It was kind of the Oklahoma State defense that you were used to seeing. But it was in year 3 and onwards where it really became like it was game changing. And Oklahoma State was literally like a pylon dive from college football playoff 2 years ago. I think we almost forget that. It's been kind of a long time in terms of college football years, but his defense is that impactful. And it's interesting that they were that successful, even without like super reliable pressure from the players you would think, like Jack Sawyer and JTT. We really haven't seen them wreaking as much havoc as I think we would probably like to see. Part of that is the scheme and what Ohio State's trying to do.
And Joe Alt.
Right. And part of that, yes, certainly is that offensive line is tremendous for Notre Dame. It's certainly a bend, but don't break defense. How many times did Notre Dame get close to scoring range? And that's the way Noles defenses have always been.
Risk versus reward, one of the two.
And it paid off. So that's my biggest takeaway.
Yeah.
There's others like the fact that Kyle McCord led that drive. And yes, I know he made like 2 or 3 passes that could have been picked off along the way. But the fact that he, in that moment, had the toughness and figured it out. Yeah. And was calm. And he's a leader for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of life lessons that were learned, but man, it's so much nicer to learn those lessons in a win, on a last second win, than it is in a crippling loss. So I think it will hopefully build momentum. Good time for a bye week with Marvin Harrison ankle. Who knows what's going on with that?
Which scared the crap out of me, by the way. That should have been broken. If you look at the way it bent, there's no way that thing should have still be in place, to be honest with you. Yeah. And it's I agree with you, Aaron. Actually, I really do. Like, the defense has been a breath of fresh air. I think, to be honest, I think this is the best defense I've seen since maybe we were 7 or 8 with AJ Hawk, Barbie Carpenter. Like, that's the last time I really remember a defense being like scary defense. Like, Latham Ransom was on another planet. Sonny Styles on that 4th down play, when he comes from the opposite side of the pile and then goes around and hits Hartman. Like, to me, this defense is playing more free. Last year, I felt they were so tight. Felt like they were trying to be perfect. And now I think you've seen them free and loose. I was actually very impressed with McCord's composure. Like, as someone who's coaching quarterbacks right now here in Hungary, I have a few quarterbacks. And one thing I always talk about is in the times of stress, in the times of doubting yourself, you have to overcome that with being calm and being a leader. And when people question, why did they do Devin Brown versus McCord? I tend to side on, like, I wish they would have just given the ball to McCord from day one and just said, look, you're the guy that we've kind of been planning on. Like, hey, go get it. And I think you saw that. You saw that in Western Kentucky. When he was told, hey, you're the guy, he was so much different than he was the two games.
Yeah.
Nothing against Devin Brown. I just think Kyle McCord gives you so much more chemistry with the receivers, so much more of a leadership style. Doesn't mean you can't use Devin Brown in packages, but to me, I was very impressed with Cade Stover. I thought he is just a freak. I'm sorry, like the man's a freak, and I can't wait for the Browns to pick him up, hopefully, and have another tight end to use. But no, you look at this. The other thing I was very impressed was with, we finally, I think, at the end there. Now, I'll be honest, the whole 4th down and 1, you'd run a jet sweep. Stupid call. We could talk about that in a sec, but I was very impressed with just the way that everybody on the Ohio State team held their composure. Let me ask you this, Aaron. 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, do you think this Ohio State team, down 4 points with a minute and so to go at their own 30-plus yard line, do you think that team goes down and scores? Because I'll be honest with you, I didn't think it was going to happen. I was honest. I was like, this game's over. Do you think 2 years ago that team goes down and scores?
I mean, yeah, because we had CJ Stroud and the weapons. I would say I would actually be more. That's what was so amazing about that game. Like, the fact that even though we got the ball back, I was like, I mean, I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic. Yeah. But they found a way to get it done.
Yeah.
And part of it was that offensive line. Obviously, part of it's Notre Dame having 10 players on the field. Like, that's
which is such
silly.
A dumb thing, by the way. Like, we don't give them a half yard. I'm like, dude, you're still only a yard out. Like, it doesn't make a big difference. You'd rather take that chance. But no, I look at it, and one thing I wanted to talk about was, let's talk about I would say give Ohio State the grade for the game. If A through F, what would you grade Ohio State as a whole team? We'll get into offense versus defense here in a second. As a whole team, what would you grade A through F for the whole team?
I'll give them a B.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, it's probably a worse grade if they're either at home or at a neutral site.
Yes, I agree.
But I'm factoring in the fact that you went at the end of the day, even though it was
a great
ugly,
atmosphere.
There was execution was so, play calling was so. At the end of the day, like you said, great environment. You went in there, you went into South Bend, the green out, whatever, all the above, and you got the win.
Yeah.
You
I
got
agree.
it done.
I agree.
Against a top 10 team.
Yeah, we forget about that. They were a top 10 team, and Josh Pate, I think, said it best, and a couple of the guys from Ohio State, the podcast, they talked about this. This was the most physical game some of these people have seen, they said, in 10 years. Like they said, you saw big dudes like Cade Stover, JTT, walking out like limp, dragging their leg, like beat the snot out of, because that was Big Ten football. Hey, Notre Dame, stop trying to just join the Big Ten. Like that's what you play like. You play like Wisconsin and all these other teams. So for me, I felt I didn't know what I was going to grade. I was trying to figure out what I would grade them today. I think I'm going to give them a B plus. And the only reason I'm giving them a plus is because that last drive, right? That last drive was a man drive. That was we're going to win this game no matter what. We're going to sacrifice. Did they drop an interception? Of course. Ohio State dropped 3 interceptions. But they're defensive players. They're not supposed to catch the ball. That's why they're there.
That's why they're on defense.
I think honestly, though, I look at this team. It was a physical game. We learned a lot about Ohio State. We learned about their toughness, and we'll talk about the Ryan Day quote at the end of our Ohio State talk. But I want to specifically talk about the offensive, not the offense, I should say. What would you say is your biggest worry on offense coming out of this game? And we'll talk about what's their biggest worry or concern coming out of the defense after this game. Offensive.
Yeah, I think offensively, and I'm picking the obvious one here, but how healthy will Marvin Harrison be? Like, is this a thing where he's good in a couple weeks? Like, hey, as the bye week, I'm assuming he plays against Maryland, or is this a thing that kind of nags him?
Jackson Smith and Jake Butt type.
Right.
That's scary.
And obviously you hope not to that extent, but yeah, same idea though. Even if if he's playing, he doesn't have that burst like you saw late in that game.
Did not have his
Kyle
burst.
McCord threw him a really, really nice ball deep and just didn't quite have that extra step that he usually does. Yeah. That he normally, catches the ball in perfect stride and runs it however long down the field. So that's probably the biggest one. The second one is, I think, just finding a way to run enough plays to get into a rhythm.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame obviously had a strategy.
They
were going to use their 4 or 5 running backs that they used.
6, actually. I counted 6 in that game.
Yeah, I think they used 6. I mean, that running back room is crazy. And credit Ohio State for really making life difficult. I mean, Jeremiah Love is a freshman running back there who's going to be just
a stud.
I mean, he's a stud now. And you're right. He's going to get only better. Notre Dame held the ball for 35 minutes of game time, which is obviously a higher percentage, but I don't have the breakdown in front of me, but that second half time of possession was significant.
Yeah.
And credit the defense for, again, bending but not breaking. They hung in there. There's a reason if they're beat up, it's because they were on the field that entire second half practically.
Yeah.
But it's partly the time rules now in college football, but it's partly just...
Which I hate, by the way. Which I hate.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
So dumb.
Yeah. Don't give me this false pretense of, the games are too long and then just shove commercials in our face.
Yeah, that's right. Josh and I say that every week. Like it's
terrible.
Yeah, it is.
So I just trying to find that rhythm because there's been moments. Obviously, the Western Kentucky game was almost a complete game of really good offensive rhythm. But when you get into the Big Ten play, Maryland, we get after a bye week and
be careful.
Yeah, be careful because they played this close. Previously, you've got a quarterback there who's got a ton of experience. That's a good team. You've got the Penn State on your schedule. You've got the Michigan, Wisconsin. Their only loss is to Washington State, which now looking back is like, okay, you went to Washington State and lost. That's actually really understandable now. Yeah. So the schedule has a lot of difficult opponents on it still. So I think just offensive rhythm and what that looks like, getting the ball into Travion Henderson's hands enough. He had 14 carries over 100
yards. He's
RB1,
by the way, anyone that is asking, he's RB1. Let's just stop that banter.
No question about that.
That's talking to myself because I kept saying Traina was number 1 for the last couple of weeks. And then I realized that was stupid. Just dumb comments, but no, I want to touch on what you said. To be honest, the biggest weakness I see right now is the offensive line. Like I am,
yeah, sure.
I am right now. If you would ask me, hey, Ben, what are you more confident in? The defensive line having 0 sacks, really? I mean, they have a few, but technically really 0. And the offensive line, all these stupid penalties. To me, the tackles have been the weakest we've seen in a very long time. Yeah. Fryer made stupid penalty on that, whatever that was, that gain. We had what it was like a 20-yard gain that he ends up. But by the way, come on, refs, let them play a little bit. I mean, it was. But then the transfer, I can't remember his name. What's his name? Left tackle. What's his name? I forget now. I'm blanking.
Is it Fryer?
No, I'm Fryer's right tackle. The guy from San Diego State. Oh, I'm blanking.
Yeah, it's slipping my mind too.
Yes. But anyways, that just shows you how much he annoys me. The amount of penalties, the missed blocks. Like, I'll be honest, Heinzman has looked okay at times at center. He hasn't looked tremendous. Like, I was like, man, if we could have just kept either one of the 3 that left early, if we could have kept Weipler, or if we could have kept Jones, the guard play has been okay. Donovan Jackson has not looked like the Donovan Jackson I think we thought we had at guard. Matt Jones has been, I think, the Matt Jones we always know of. Like, he's good, but he's not great. He's not bad. He's there. And I'll be honest with you, the offensive line worries me because this Penn State team, dude, let's not think this is just a normal Penn State team. This defense is legit. Wisconsin's going to have a very good defense. Michigan's going to have obviously a very good defense. This offensive line has a couple weeks to get themselves fixed up. And I don't know if that means Fry needs to do something. Ryan Day needs to sit down and go, hey, what do we need to fix? It just worries me a lot. That more than anything, like the only other thing I would say would be you need to find a way to get the ball, I think, a little bit more into Henderson's hands and a little bit more, and you need to start splitting reps with the running backs. Like, Henderson cannot be carrying it 15, 16, 17, 18 times. I think you have to get Mayan Williams involved. I think Dallin Hayden, man, I miss Dallin Hayden. Get him involved. So, but honestly, that's like my, very small things. I think McCord's obviously going to grow. The wide receivers are still going to be freaking good. Tight end play is going to be fine. But I want to know your thoughts on that. Am I overreacting on the offensive line, or
no?
Kind of the same?
On the offensive line, I would say not, because one of the most amazing things I think about Kyle McCord is, there's been some inconsistencies, but especially in that Notre Dame game, his ability to evade pressure, it didn't phase him. He did not throw an interception. Like, that's extremely notable, because many other quarterbacks and I'm kind of speaking to Buckeye fans who have been extra critical of him.
Yeah.
That's extremely impressive. And there's not a lot of quarterbacks in the country that you could put in his spot who would also not make a mistake. So that's impressive. I'll disagree with you on the running backs a little bit. I think you should just feed Henderson. He's clearly running back 1. I mean, spread it around. You do have good depth there. The
injury thing worries me, though. That's fair. That's the one thing that foot, because we both know as athletes, foot injuries can be healed, but we all know they come back at some point.
Yeah, that's and certainly Ohio State has probably the best beat on that event of anybody.
Yeah,
those coaches, that training staff. He's averaging 6.7 yards per carry, and it's only 44 carries through 4 games.
What does Trainham have? Trainham, I think, has the second most carries on the team. He's got to have.
He's got 25, 5.8 a pop.
And then Mayan's been basically nowhere. I think he's been injured though. He hasn't been healthy. So until he gets healthy, I mean, I think you'll see Mayan later in the year. I think that's what's going to happen. I think you're going to see Mayan kind of be that guy like he is every year, where he comes in late in the year and ends up just being a bulldozer. Mm-hmm. I wish Dallin Hayden. I don't know about you. Do you think Dallin Hayden, this is a, hey, you're not good enough? Because we saw Dallin Hayden drop to basically 5th on the depth chart, pretty much. Right. Like, what's your thoughts on Dallin Hayden? Because it's very interesting where this shifted.
I mean, he had a couple breakout games last year, so I think the assumption was almost like, oh my gosh, he might be our running back 1, maybe not quite running back 1, but in the top half. I think, just in all honesty, I think the running back room is really deep, and he's just not as good as Henderson and Chip Trainham and Mayan Williams. And there's really no shame in that. Those are all really, really good players. Just the fact that all of those players are actually back playing, unlike last year where you were down to your 3rd, 4th, 5th string running backs.
It gives you more realistic. Let you be more realistic. Yeah. So we look at the defense then. What are some weaknesses that maybe you spotted? I mean, I spotted a couple. Not weaknesses. I shouldn't say weaknesses. I think just concerns, not weaknesses, but concerns. Do you have any concerns with this? I mean, we might be going in the same spot here, but I want to hear your thoughts on some concerns you have with the Ohio State defense going into these next few games.
Yeah, we might be going in the same spot. I'll just say the defensive line is not getting as much pressure on quarterbacks as I thought. I'm not necessarily surprised that they didn't get a ton on Sam Hartman, given that offensive line. But I'd like to see more than 5 sacks from this team to this point in the season, especially when you've got guys like Jack Sawyer and JTT. And you know what?
Hayden Curry.
Yeah, time will tell, and it's partly the scheme. They're trying to keep everything in front of them. But that's probably but honestly, like, I'm not going to nitpick the defense. It's been unbelievable.
Yeah.
So.
And I agree. And that's probably the only one I have as well as the defensive line. I think I won't say defensive line. I'll say edge rushers, because I think,
the tackles have been pretty good.
I think Hall, all these guys on the side, Hamilton and all these guys. I mean, the one thing too is I think JTT has been more alive than Sawyer. Sawyer just feels like he's kind of faded into this, like, hey, I'm here. I'll make a play when I need to. I guess for me, like, this is what I think happened, honestly, Aaron, is we got spoiled. We had Nick Bosa, then we had Joey Bosa, then we had Nick Bosa, then we had Young, then we had, we had guy after guy after guy. We had Harrison, who we thought was going to be the next one. But, again, I'll be honest, like, it's hard to really criticize or to have this bad thing when, man, we've been used to defenses sucking. We've been used to giving up 300 yards in the air and then barely surviving, right? Like, I hope we get back to the Jim Tressel times where, hey, yeah, we just run the ball and we play good defense. Man, I would live to be able to where we could go, hey, we'll keep a team to 10 points. Hey, offense, you only have to put up 20. And I think Buckeye fans, and I think that's why they're so critical. And I heard so many Buckeye fans at the Notre Dame game go, oh, we only won by inches. I'm like, dude, that's a game of football. Like that's if you're more excited about giving up 25, 30 points than to give up 14 points to a top 10 team, then there's something wrong. Because to me, what makes football amazing, and you grew up around it as well, is when you just are hard hitting, you put your nose where it needs to be, and you make plays. And what did this defense do? Latham Ransom made plays. Eichenberg. Steel Chambers, by the way, is a freaking beast. He's probably the most underrated linebacker right now in the Big Ten. The way he can go from one side of the field to the other side of the field and make a tackle. You have Sonny Styles. You have, I'm naming it, I can't even say his name, but I think, to be honest, Burke, he's finally looking like the freshman Burke that we've been praying for. So to me, it's very hard for me to criticize that team, the defense specifically, because I feel like this defense is what's keeping this team in games. It's what's going to keep them in games. And look, I think Josh Pate said it best. Stop worrying about Ohio State's offense. They have a very good offensive head coach. As long as the defense keeps playing like this, I have no worries. Ohio State fans, look, I have no worries. Ryan Day has done this for how many years? He finds a way. He's going to find a way. So yeah, anything you want to touch on that? Or I know I rambled there for a second.
I mean, I've got some worries, but I'm probably a little less optimistic about Ohio State, just generally speaking. Not that I think they're going to go like 8-4, but I just look at Penn State. The way they're humming now.
Generally, what would you think then? Basically, do you think this team goes undefeated, or does your gut say, hey, they lose one of those two big games?
I think they lose one of the big games.
Yeah.
Either Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin. I have a hard time. And look, you said it though. The defense will keep you in every game. And I haven't seen a game, and I'm dating myself by going here, but this was such a 2002-esque game for Ohio State that whole season, because they had, if you go back and watch some of those games or even just check some of the box scores, they had all kinds of ridiculous games that felt a lot like that Notre Dame game, where the defense is slugging it out and the offense finds just enough plays at the end to pull off this magic victory. Yeah, Craig Krenzel. You talk about the Purdue game. I mean, I think they went to Cincinnati that year, had to pull out the game in overtime. They had a double overtime game against Illinois leading up to the Michigan game.
Overtime against Miami to win it. So
right, yeah. So it very much felt like that. So I think Buckeye fans are going to be on edge against teams like Rutgers, maybe, and against Wisconsin more than you have had to be in the past.
Yeah.
And that's obviously going to bring up some frustrations for these same fans that are used to, like you said, putting 50, 60 points up on people. But at the same time, even if you do have an offense that's not elite, which maybe it will get to that point. As of right now, it's not, which is okay. It's good.
Yeah.
The defense might be elite.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of switching things. I think bottom line, Ohio State can go undefeated.
Yes.
Absolutely. But that Penn State team's really good.
They're really good.
That Michigan team's really good. And we'll see about Wisconsin and some of those other teams. But
I've felt Penn State maybe is a little bit better than Michigan right now, just because I've watched some Michigan games, and Michigan does not look like the same Michigan, I guess, offensively than they were last year. But also, you know what, this is funny? When you said that about 2002, I thought about this the whole time. If you look at the teams side by side, I go, to be honest, this feels like a 2002 team, because what do we have? An elite running back. What did we have back then? An elite running back. We had kind of not really a no-name quarterback, but a guy that was still like, what do we have? Right? What do we have? We had elite receiver and what was it? Malcolm Jenkins?
Yeah, Michael Jenkins.
Michael Jenkins.
Gamble.
Yeah. Michael Jenkins, Chris Gamble. What do we have? Abuka, Harrison Jr. I'm not saying those guys are the same level. Obviously, those guys are better than what the guys were in the past. But what I'm saying is, then you look at the defense. 3 stud linebackers. What do we have? 3 stud linebackers. Defensive line was legit. You look at this defensive line, legit. So in a weird way, guys, if you're a Ohio State fan, you're doubting. Just look at that as hope. Okay. Just stare at that season as some hope. But again, I think I'm more optimistic because I'm trying to put that faith into Ryan Day, because so many people have like basically said, fire him, get rid of him. He's lost to Michigan twice. I'm like, guys, dude, just give him a chance to put something together with a second year defense and see what happens. So that's my thoughts on it. Again, I think we're both proud that Ohio State pulled it out. I think we both are a lot happier. If we're talking about this as a happy version, if we would have lost, it would have been a totally different, obviously, conversation.
Well, what's your grade? Let's say that final drive doesn't go well. You gave the Buckeyes a B+.
Yes.
If they lose that game, what's your grade?
C+. Okay. I'll go a whole letter. I just think that drive showed me like that this team has the toughness and has the grit. And speaking of toughness, we can't gloss over what was spoken after the game. Now, I have my own opinion on it, and I know many Buckeyes fans, but what was your thought? Like, first watching it, and then as you've thought about it now, do you think it was a good thing, or do you think this was like, okay, Ryan Day, stop being an idiot?
I think it's a good thing, because Buckeye fans have been clamoring for that same Ryan Day that was just fired up heading into the Georgia game, really let it loose. And as we know, came a field goal away from, in all honesty, winning a national championship. That's the kind of fire Buckeye fans want. Now, if you're not a Buckeye fan, which is everyone else,
outside of Ohio,
there's no in between for Ohio State. You're either a fan or you hate them, and I get it. It comes across as corny. It comes across as weird. It almost comes across as punching down at someone who is above 80 years old. My take on it, though, is that, there were some comments made. And Ryan Day, I think, was upset at those comments. But really, this was a message to all of the criticism that Ohio State has faced in the last few weeks. And there's been a lot. I will say this. A lot of that criticism has been fair. And I know Ryan Day is 50-6, his record. Saying he should be fired after 2 Michigan losses, that's insane. But what's not insane is to look at some of the play calling and the decision making and say, and scratch your head and think, why are we doing this? And the 4th and 1 comes to mind. We're not talking about that 4th and 1 a lot, because Ohio State did have that drive and they did win the game. If they lose, that's all anyone in Columbus is talking about for 2 weeks, because of how bad that play call was. And there's some other things sprinkled in there too. I don't think we need to get into everything, but bottom line is, the comments were interesting. It felt like just a super personal attack. And I think really it was a culmination of all the criticism, and it just got directed at one person.
Yeah, I think, but this is where I said, Lou Holtz first, dude, just shut your mouth. Like if you're gonna say, like, my biggest thing, and like Lou Holtz came out and then, like, I love how he comes back out and basically just attacks Ohio State again, which is just really funny at that point. I'm like, dude, 80-year-old man, like, just calm down. He's never liked Ohio State, so that's just a fact in itself.
Right.
And Brady Quinn's came out and said stuff. I'm like, okay, whatever, it's fine. Ryan Day was finally saying something over the last few years. I mean, we've witnessed it the last few years. We've gotten so much hammered from the national media. Ohio State's not legit. They're never going to be that team. And I think Ryan Day, this was like the final match in the batch of gasoline. There's gasoline just pouring on Ohio State, and this was the final match of like on national television on the Pat McAfee show, which basically is one of the most popular shows on planet Earth. And you hear that as a coach, you can only handle so much, right? I'm a teacher. There's only so much I can handle before I hit that moment. And I think winning that game the way they did, by inches, by putting your nose in the ground and saying, we're going to win this no matter what. That was Ryan Day. I think Josh Pate said it. I keep going back to Josh Pate, but I love what he said. He said it the best. He said he was looking in that camera right at his team, right at the state of Ohio, right at the city of Columbus, and saying, it does not matter what out here, what they say. What matters is in this locker room, what we believe. And in a way, it's almost taking a play out of Deion Sanders' book, in a sense. Like this, like we believe in ourselves. And I think Ohio State, we could be talking about this in January when they're holding up a national championship trophy. We could be looking back at this and saying, this was the moment that the season shifted, that we finally got to see this fiery. Because if we get the fiery Ryan Day, Big Ten, watch out. I'm just saying, if we get that Ryan Day from Georgia, this could be a very scary rest of the season for other teams. I think so. Yeah. I think that's the top part. We've talked about Ohio State for so long, but let's go real quickly. Is there any other things that popped your head at college football, teams that maybe were like, oh, they might not be legit, or, hey, this is going to be a fun season?
Well, I think it's going to be a fun season. The Pac-12 is insane.
We're
going to get into our power rankings. So some of those teams I'll talk about then, but I'm really happy that the Pac-12 is this good.
And the last year. On the last year.
Right. I mean, it pains my soul that this is all going away. It pains my soul that Oregon State and Washington State are getting left.
They're going to go to the Mountain West is what's going to happen.
Well, so there was something that came out with the college football playoff that it's official. I believe it's next year, the 6-6 format, meaning the top 6 conference champions and then 6 at-large bids. That's for sure staying. And maybe it's through 2026. I can't remember exactly. But what it means is for that specific scenario, the Pac-2, as it were, can actually invite the Mountain West to, it doesn't really matter. But the point is that even though they're getting left behind, they will have, in theory, a pretty decent opportunity to still make the college football playoff, which I love. This is a very sucky situation for them, but that part at least is pretty cool. That they're not going to be just totally nationally irrelevant. Yeah, it doesn't appear.
Yeah, I love the Pac-12. I think my cool thing is, I guess, the basketball powerhouses that are all of a sudden decide to be football powerhouses. I shared that on our Instagram, and I was like, Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke. By the way, Notre Dame, Ohio State, smart break after Notre Dame. Notre Dame thought that I think Duke was going to be that nice, easy road game. Nope. No, that's going to be a fun one.
And then they're probably playing a 5-0 Louisville team after that.
That is true. That they didn't get an easy schedule.
And then USC is like 2 weeks out. I mean, it's brutal for Notre Dame. Brutal. Don't let anyone tell you that Notre Dame's got an easy schedule this year.
Join a conference. Save yourselves. No, I think that's some of the games actually I wanted to talk about was Florida State struggling. Do you yes or no? Florida State is a top 6 team in the country. Yes or no? Yes. Okay. I'm glad you said that because a lot of people have been messaging me saying that they're not, and I said, "Are you nuts?"
Everyone wants to dunk on Clemson so hard, and I get it. That if Florida State goes to Clemson and beats Clemson, even though it's kind of ugly, everyone's like, "Oh, Florida State's not that good. They only beat Clemson by so much." I'm like, Clemson was, I think, 40-1 in their last 41 home games. Like, what are we talking about? I know they've had their struggles, and we'll potentially get into that later, but the fact that people are somehow like clowning Florida State for only winning at Clemson by so much, like for breaking a 7-game losing streak and like a 9-year road losing streak. Like, what are we talking about? Like Florida State's got, and maybe they won't be good. Maybe they'll prove that. But Florida State, for my money, has the 2 best wins in college football.
I put on, I think, and the other thing I wanted to get your take on, we talked about last week on our show, 2 things. Well, first, Alabama. What do you feel for Alabama? Do you feel Alabama going into this next week and obviously the weeks after? Do you think this is like just that was a hiccup against Texas, or do you feel like this is going to be maybe more of a constant theme that maybe they are more of a 2-loss team from now on, not as much as an undefeated team?
I've been probably the thing I've been most wrong about so far is Alabama's offensive line and their ability to run the football.
Yeah.
Because I knew the quarterback situation, I think you knew was going to be somewhat of a concern. Like if you were adding Tyler Buckner, and no offense to him, but if you were adding Tyler Buckner like in the middle of the summer as a transfer, that to me was like, that's a bit concerning if Alabama's doing that, because it means that they don't feel super confident in either Ty Simpson or Jalen Milroe. So, and I don't think any of that's necessarily changed. I just thought that they would take their running backs and that really good offensive line and they would just bludgeon teams to death. And they're going to have to do that a little bit, but they have not done it to the extent where I feel confident that they can do that the rest of the way without losing to an LSU, without losing to Texas A&M maybe, or whoever trips them up. Or maybe it's not even until the SEC championship game. Maybe they do find a way to run the rest of the West, but that has not worked out. And so, I mean, Milroe's got a cannon. You saw that against Ole Miss. And that was a great win by Alabama. Obviously, you saved your season by, if you lose there.
Yeah, if you lose that, it's done.
You're done. I mean, 2 losses in September. When's the last time that's happened for Alabama?
Yeah.
Probably
never.
Not since Saban's first year when they lost to Louisiana Monroe. That happened, by the way. Look it up, 2007. Or I think it was 2007. So that happened. Anyways, that's a long-winded way of answering your question. That future looking, I'm not sure. Like, what does this look like in 2025?
They're
couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
I mean, the recruiting classes are stupid. I think the biggest thing is actually their assistant coaching is not as good this year as it has been. Like Tommy Rees is an offensive coordinator.
Why?
I'm scratching my head a little bit about that one, but
I think
for me to say.
Yeah, I think I'm agree with you on all those things you said. I guess another surprise for me, if I look around at other teams, first off, I thought Iowa's offense was going to be half decent better, but I guess they're just back to being Iowa offense. I think it's time for Ferentz to go. But no, I think the other thing that really has shocked me was how good Texas has been playing. I was very critical of Texas last year. I was very critical of Texas in the offseason. And all of a sudden, I am now somehow, I still am sitting here going, really, Texas? Like, is this legit for Texas? And I want to get your quick thoughts. I know you'll talk about it maybe a little bit later, but for me, I just think Texas is playing above the bar. I think, and if they can keep this going, I think they have a good shot, because I think the Big 12 is really Oklahoma, Texas. I really think that's all is in the Big 12 right now. That's all it is.
Yeah, I agree. The Big 12 seems like it's somewhat down this year, which is a little surprising.
The Big 10 as well. I think the Big 10 is down as well.
Yeah. Kansas State, I think, will be in the mix. Maybe.
Kansas.
Yeah, Kansas could be. Obviously, they play Texas this week, and we know how well the Longhorns usually fare against the Jayhawks in recent memory.
It's true.
This week against Baylor was a little bit better. I think that probably speaks more about how bad Baylor is than anything. I'm a little worried that Texas is going to still play to the level of their competition. And even if the Big 12 is a little bit worse this year, maybe that means that you find yourself in a close game with Oklahoma State, or they're not a great example because they're not very good, but maybe it's a Texas Tech, maybe it's a TCU, maybe it's even a West Virginia, who I think has been a little bit better than people thought.
Yeah.
That you're going to get into a close game in the third and fourth quarter. But the difference with this year's team is that Texas has always had good players. They have elite players this year. They have elite players, especially on offense, but that defense is so good too. I think they're legit. And we always joke about we have a kind of running thing that Texas is never back on our show. And technically they still are not back, because there's a certain definition of like qualifications that you have to hit for Texas to be back. It's a bit that we do, and we've kept it going for the entire time of the podcast, because truly they have not been back since we started. But this year's a little bit different. And I think you're right. You said it. The Big 12 seems like it's kind of a two-team race. I'll throw Kansas State in there, and maybe
ACC is the same way. I think Big 10's the same way.
I wouldn't say that about the ACC.
Well, Big 10 is 3 teams. I think 3 teams. ACC is probably 4. I think 4 teams for the ACC.
Yeah,
but it is nuts. I mean, just so we're all, as we're recording this, if you know Big 10, speaking of Big 10, Mel Tucker fired at Michigan State. So now we've had 2 crazy conduct situations in the Big 10. Who would have thought? Northwestern, by the way, coming back and beating Minnesota.
That was crazy.
It's just weird. All right. Football is weird. And speaking of football, before we shift to the NFL, let's quickly go over not quickly, but we can talk about it. Our power rankings. Now Josh is not here. Now Josh gave me his, so I will be courteous. I will be courteous because I like Josh and I don't want to get yelled at next episode. But here is Josh's power rankings. So we'll start with power rankings and we'll go Heisman. Josh's power rankings, updated power rankings for this week, is Georgia at number 1. He has Texas at number 2. He has Ohio State at number 3. He has Michigan at 4, and he has USC at 5. I believe those were the same. He might have actually, I can check. Yeah, those were the same, other than Michigan and Ohio State. He had flopped last week. So those are his thoughts on his, and then you can share yours, and I'll share mine last.
I'm obviously a little bit biased towards my own power rankings that I'll share. But USC at 5 is kind of crazy because I feel like they're the 3rd best team in their own conference.
Oh, where are you? Oh, let's see this. Where are you going with this? I'm curious now.
All right, I'll count down. I'll go from 5 to 1
to
really build the suspense here.
Suspense.
I've got Ohio State at 5, and I know that's for Buckeye fans. That probably feels like it
hurts, man.
That's unkind to them because let's face it, that was a terrific win against Notre Dame.
Top 10 win
on the road. At the end of the day, as ugly as it was, top 10 win on the road. That's one of the best wins in college football.
That could save your season if you have one loss. That really could, to put you in the playoff.
Yeah. I just think that because the offense at this point is not super clicking right now, that they're going to be in kind of like what I said for, what team was I even talking? Oh, kind of like what I was talking about with Texas. If you let enough teams hang around, even if the Big 12 is down or the Big 10, regardless of whether or not that is true, there are quality teams in both of those conferences that have the talent to take you out. And Maryland could be a perfect example. And it feels like one of these years, Maryland has to take out Michigan, Penn State, or Ohio State just once. It hasn't happened. You just feel like it has to. Obviously, I don't hope that for the Buckeyes. They've been close in the past. So that's kind of why I have them at number 5. And I will say with an asterisk that they could rapidly shoot up these power rankings if they continue to handle business and as other teams fall. Number 4, I've got Texas. I kind of just outlined them, so I won't really dive into that. Number 3, I have Georgia. So these are power rankings. So I don't have to put the defending national champions at number 1. You're more than welcome to. I have no beef with that. They're number 1 in our top 25. I don't necessarily have any reason to say that they should be higher or lower. It's not looked quite like the same Georgia team.
Has not.
And I don't think Auburn's all that good, but they're at least heading to Auburn, or I can't remember. Either Auburn's going, regardless, they're playing Auburn. That's better than some of the teams they've faced. So we'll see. South Carolina was that was an interesting first half, and then Georgia kind of woke up and remembered that they had to play football day.
We're a national champion. Oh, right.
Yeah, we should probably beat South Carolina. So they did, but we'll see.
Shows you how good that talent is, by the way. They can just flip a switch like that. And still some really good talent there. I will say there's injury concerns there. Like the running back position is already really beat up, was actually beat up before the season even started. So as we get further and further along, I mean, we know what happened to Ohio State last year. That became a big deal. Number 2, I've got Florida State. I said it. I think they've got the best 2 wins in college football. Florida State.
Florida State. Yeah. And a lot of people are somehow, I still don't quite understand it. They're nitpicking that Clemson win. Like, well, if Clemson,
they love Clemson, man. You know? Yeah.
If Clemson would have had their top cornerback knocked out, then Clemson probably would have won. I don't know that. That's what all the Clemson fans are saying. Florida State won. This September was make or break for them. Like, look at the rest of their schedule. Yeah, there's challenges. They've got to go to Miami. They've got some other teams on the schedule. But September, games against LSU and this game against Clemson, this could have been a disaster. They could have been 2-2. And the question you're asking is, oh my gosh, is Florida State actually back? Was last year an anomaly? Is Mike Norvell actually the coach that we think he is? We're not asking any of those questions because they're 4-0. Instead, we're like, oh my gosh, Florida State is almost a lock for the playoff. And I use that in very big air quotes because no team is a lock for the playoff in September. But we are considering them as, well, it's going to be hard for them to be unseated from the ACC championship.
Who's number 1? Now, this is just my mind's turning now.
Now, number 1.
Oh, please don't tell me you're going to go with the team I think you're going to go with.
I probably am. This team has not played very quality opponents. So I will caveat it with that. However, these are not top 25 rankings. These are power rankings. For my money, the best team in college football is the Washington Huskies.
Oh my word. I knew.
You thought I was going to go Michigan. I'm not going Michigan.
No. I thought maybe you were going to go Oregon. I thought you were going to lose.
No.
I was going to lose my mind.
Oregon would be the team I would also have above USC.
The reason why I'm saying that is because people are like, they beat Colorado. I'm like, guys, Colorado is not that good. Let's just let me just make that clear. They're for the clicks, just like their coach said. They're for the clicks. We'll leave it at that. We're not even talking about.
By the way, on that note, I love that. That was again a thing where Dan Manning's not talking to college football fans when he says that. He is talking to his team specifically. What team has had more clicks in the last 20 years than Oregon? Nobody. Oregon's Mr. Nike uniforms. They had like this 6-minute mini movie after the game. Like every team, you win college football by getting clicks.
Yes,
you just do. It's part of the game. So he was not speaking to you, Mr. College football fan. That's like, oh, well, Oregon's trying to get clicks too. Of course they are.
Of course.
He wasn't talking. He said
it.
He was talking to his team, which great on him. But this Washington team, Michael Penix
Their
Jr.
offense is.
The offense.
Are we glad?
Insane.
Are we glad that he left the Big Ten? I'm very glad that he left the Big Ten.
I mean, selfishly, yeah.
Selfishly, I'm very glad.
Indiana hasn't been the same since, but
yeah, wow, that
selfishly.
is.
And I can go into more detail. I think the defense is the biggest concern there, but there's not many teams in the Pac-12 that do play defense, and I do think Washington is a better defense in the Pac-12. Utah's got a better defense. Oregon State's got a better defense, but that might be about it.
They have a lot of weapons. He has a lot of weapons.
And oh my gosh, the weapons are insane.
Yeah.
And I know they haven't played very good at opponents. Like Boise State is their best team, but they have just absolutely obliterated everybody.
Yeah.
And we'll get a chance to see if I'm right. They play Oregon, they play USC, they play Oregon State, they play Washington State.
Which, by the way, as Josh and I said a couple weeks ago, the Pac-12 might be good, but they also might hurt each other because of all these teams knocking each other off, which might end up hurting the Pac-12. Which, again, where's the 12-team playoff comes into factor. My power rankings. Now, mine have changed a lot since last week. And number 5 for me is Michigan. Now, the reason why I have Michigan there is because their offense is not as good as I thought it was going to be. It kind of worries me a little bit. It feels weird. Like you watch the offense, it just doesn't seem the same dominant offense. Their defense is still freakishly good. It's just stupid good. So Michigan at 5. Sorry, at 4 I have Washington. I couldn't leave Washington out of my top 5. I didn't know where I was putting them, but I was like, dude, this Washington offense is just. To watch them is, for me as an offensive coordinator here in Hungary, it is so much fun. I like taking notes like, oh, I need to do that. I need to do that, whatever. Awesome to watch. 3 for me is Ohio State. They stay where they're at. I love the win. Do I think this puts them in a top 2 position? No. I still think they need to go get the offense better. They need to go get a win against Penn State. If they get a win against Penn State, okay, then we're talking. Get a win at Wisconsin, then we're talking. 2 for me is Texas. I just think the consistency they've had so far, again, we still got to see if they'll do it. But there too, and Georgia, I'm on the bandwagon of, hey, you won a national title until someone beats you, you're the best team in football. So for me, Georgia's at 1. I everything you said, I can counter that and say the same thing. So that's what I would say with those. See, I wasn't too bizarre. Bizarre, Aaron. It wasn't too bizarre.
The biggest beef I have is Josh having USC at 5.
Josh,
because they can't play defense on a refrigerator. I'm sorry.
So bad, dude. So the defense is atrocious. It's funny because their defense coordinator is a former Ohio State defense coordinator. Huh.
Oh yeah. Well, he's he's part of the problem.
He's the problem. So now we have Heisman. We have Heisman watch.
Yep.
And that's always fun because we have guys that probably feel like, dude, you're stupid. Why are you doing this? No. Here's Josh's. So Josh has at 5 to, we'll go 5 to 1. So at 5 he has Dylan Gabriel. At 3 he has 4 he has Cam Ward from Washington State. At 3 he has Bo Nix. At 2 he has Michael Penix Jr. And at 1 he has Caleb Williams. What do you think of his list? And feel free, let us hear your craziness, because we all know Aaron Lynn has at least one dude in there that is just out of the mind
that no one knows about yet.
Yes,
I like that list. I love him giving some love to Cam Ward, Washington State quarterback, who
no one knows, probably, to be honest.
Yeah, no one knows. Incarnate Word transfer last year into Washington State, had his ups and downs, had some really good moments, had a lot of turnovers and bad mistakes, and he's cut those out this year so far. And they have already got wins against Wisconsin and Oregon State. And outside of perhaps Florida State, those actually might be the 2 best wins. Well, and Florida State, obviously. Those are really good wins. So he's been balling out. That's a great pick. And
He
Caleb Williams,
he also dropped Shador Sanders, so just so no one thinks he's going to keep him in there.
Yeah, so that's Shedeur Sanders just missed my list as well, but I do want to give him a shout out because his stats and
unreal.
his level of play has been unreal. That offensive line is horrible.
It's so bad.
It's horrible.
It's so bad.
He's taking 6, 7, 8 sacks a game.
Didn't he have he had like 5 carries for like a 92 yard, or it was like 8 carries for like 80 yards or something, negative 80 yards or something like that.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
I mean, he's getting blasted every game and he's still finding a way to make plays and only has 1 interception. That's crazy. So he deserves a lot of credit just because he's not. And I will say, honestly, for me, I just assume USC is going to go in to Colorado and wax him.
Yes, that's what I'm assuming.
And so to a certain extent, like you do have to win some games to be, whether fair or not, and whether that should be the case, like you just have to be on a winning team to win the Heisman. That's just the way it is. So number 5 for me is Quinn Ewers.
Been solid.
Pretty much goes without saying.
High state product. We developed him, obviously.
Developed here. I've got Caleb Williams at 4, and it's not because he has not played well. He's just played food all season long.
That's true.
And I think I would have some decent
only played
numbers.
Like a half each time, so because he's on my
his numbers
team.
His numbers are ridiculous,
team, and he's screwing me over on my fan. No, he's not. He's on my friend's fantasy team because I have Bo Nix, and Bo Nix is doing the same thing. Bo Nix plays a half, and I'm like, can you play a full game so I can get 40 points instead of 20?
Right.
Just saying.
So I have no argument with him being at the top of anyone's Heisman list, like it is for Josh. That makes a lot of sense. He won it last year. I do think in the national narrative, there's going to be some voter fatigue, like there is for any incumbent.
He's not going to win it
Heisman.
twice. He's not going to win it twice. It's
Probably not.
It's obvious,
but he's balling out. Like it's not his fault that he's on this list at 4. It's just they haven't played anybody. Number 3 is Jordan Travis. He's been tremendous. He's been in college since before you and I were born.
That's true.
2, like some others on this list. Bo Nix, number 2. I really like him.
Had a phenomenal game.
And Michael Penix Jr., man, number 1 without question.
Thank you. Yeah. I got so many comments last week that I put him number 1. He was number 1 last week before another great game. But for me, I think I start with Quinn Ewers. Again, he was 4 last week for me. I just feel like Quinn Ewers he's doing everything he has to, right? He's being solid. He's been capable. So he's at 5 for me. 4 is Dylan Gabriel. I think Dylan Gabriel has been absolutely phenomenal. He's took this Oklahoma team from being basically an okay team last year to now a team that, hey, could compete with Texas and be a quality team. At 3, I was really debating, but I'm going to go with Caleb Williams. Again, I haven't seen enough of Caleb Williams. I feel like I'm only seeing, he's coming out for halftime to do a halftime show, and that's all I see. I don't really get to see the whole act, right? So Caleb Williams at 3. 2 for me is Bo Nix. Like I said, I'm a big Bo fan. He's also been in college football since like 2016.
Yeah.
By the way, he had a great game against Oregon, and now he plays for Oregon. It's really weird. And Michael Penix Jr. To me right now, if I would say how big of a win would he get, he might have a huge win in the Heisman voting if it was right now because of just what he's done. But I can't wait to see that matchup against USC. I can't wait to see that matchup against a lot of other teams to see how he does against some top tier opponents. So for me, that is my Heisman watch list. That is our Heisman watch list, which means he's getting his own graphic this week, Aaron.
Yay.
Which is great. But before we finish, so we are going to do a quick rundown of the NFL. Let's just talk about your Lions and talk about my Browns, and then we can kind of finish up with a memory of Ohio State, and then we call it a show. Let's start with your Lions. Some interesting moves at the draft. We never actually got to talk to you after the draft. Josh and I were very confused on the draft of the Lions. But now that you look at a few games in, what's your thoughts on the Lions?
It's hard to argue with. Well, I was about to say it's hard to argue with 2-1, and then I just thought, well, we could have beat the Seahawks in overtime and been 3-0. So it's actually pretty easy to argue with 2-1. But I think 2-1 through games. We did not split the Chiefs Seahawks games the way I thought. I kind of figured we'd lose to Kansas City and beat Seattle, but whatever. 2-1 going into a really big division game against Green Bay, who's also 2-1. We know how bad Chicago's been. Minnesota is 0-3. So the division's not going to be decided on Thursday, but it's a really big deal. Yeah. And so to be in that situation is exciting for Detroit fans who have not had very many of those games. On the subject of the draft, I liked the players that they picked.
Just too early, man.
Yeah, too early.
Too early.
Like, do you really want a running back at 12? Maybe. And so far, that front office has done a really good job of pulling in talent. And Sam Laporta, that's been a home run so far. The most catches by a tight end in his first 3 games ever, I believe, in the NFL. So that's notable. Jack Campbell at linebacker, that just made so much sense. He's
a lion, man. He just is a lion.
That made so much sense. And so we'll see, like, Gibbs is in kind of a weird situation where they don't necessarily always want to use him as like the every down back, but now that David Montgomery's been hurt, he's kind of in that role. So I think they're still kind of feeling their way out. So the draft was interesting, but so far it's paid out well. The defense has been much improved. Like, that defense was abysmal last year. Yeah. It seems like the Lions really fixed it. On the other side, the Vikings, who were in a very similar situation last year, they just had some more of those close games go their way. They did not fix their defense. They went wide receiver with Jordan Addison, and he's great, but Kirk Cousins is doing a handstand, and they can't win a game.
Yeah.
So we could be where Minnesota is, and I'm very thankful we are not. We are 2-1. So overall, I feel good watching DeAndre Swift dice up defenses with Philadelphia every week. That's starting to get a little annoying. I'm like, okay, did we make a mistake here? And I know it's a contract year for him, but I'm like, okay. So I don't know about that, but overall, pretty pleased. And maybe I'll feel different after Green Bay. But
that's true. Every time I see the Lions win, I just think of Aaron. I'm like, he's just happy. He's happy today. He's happy. And you know, we could talk about, listen, first off, I know I'm going to get a comment because he said Chiefs. No, we're not talking about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. Okay, listen, we're leaving that where it belongs, which is not talking about it, because why? Okay, it's obvious. It's obvious. People, they're dating. Okay, end of the story. But no, speaking of your Lions, I was very impressed with how this defense is played. I was shocked. Like, I've never seen a Lions defense, at least in my freaking lifetime. I don't think I've seen the Lions defense where they're like, oh, that's scary to watch. Like, in a good way, like this defense could do some damage. You normally it's like a Browns team, right? We're normally like, oh great, here comes the defense again. But yeah, so that is cool. How do you feel about the offensive line? Do you feel like, because that's the one thing I was always wondering, can they keep up the protection of Goff, and can they do that? Do you feel like the offensive line's played pretty well, or do you feel like they need to straighten things up a little bit after 3 weeks?
It's been a bit of a mixed bag, but injuries are a big part of that. I believe Jared Goff, outside of, it's either Justin Fields or Kirk Cousins, or maybe both, is the highest pressured quarterback right now. He's dealt with it pretty well. And when David Montgomery was in the backfield, I felt the Lions' rush offense was actually pretty decent. So it's kind of an in-between, but they really haven't been healthy. Yeah. And they were missing Taylor Decker last week. And he's a big part of that offensive line. So it should be the strength moving forward, as long as they can get healthy. I'm not super worried about that position, hopefully.
Yeah. We'll see for sure. Again, they have I think a little bit easier division than my Browns have. Just a tad. Just a tad easier. But is there anything you want to hear from me as a Browns fan, because you live in Ohio, and you probably deal with Browns fans occasionally, or Bengals fans? Is there any questions you have me about the Browns? Because I'm very shocked by the Browns, to be honest with you, this far.
Have you ever seen 2 tight ends follow a defensive end who's motioning on the formation?
This is what I'll say about that, right? I saw this video come on my phone, and I shared it with my my buddy who's in Ohio. And I said, this is what I've been waiting for like 4 years. Like, I've never seen someone get respected so much that a team's really willing to risk a penalty or a timeout just so they can have triple coverage on a defensive end, which, by the way, Zadarius Smith on the other side, no slouch. Yeah, he's also a guy that can eat things up, and he's just laughing. If you look at the video, he's cracking up. He's like, okay, fine, I'll go one-on-one. So yeah, to answer your question, it's really cool to see. And to talk about this defense, man, talk about the Lions defense, talk about the Browns defense. They're first in so many categories. Dude, this defense last year, and you watched the Browns last year, their defense was awful. Like, they couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop a long passing game. Denzel Ward was hurt all the time. They never were healthy. This defense is so much fun to watch. I'm like sitting here going, if you look at that Pittsburgh game, we lost. We literally, if you look, the defense only gave up 1 touchdown. The offense gave up more points than our defense did. And that's the reason we lost the game, right? Yep. So it's almost like a similar Ohio State thing, where it's like the defense has figured it out and the defense is good, but the offense is still trying to figure it out. But yeah, that to me is the defense is phenomenal. Yeah. And the offense, someone asked me about this, Deshaun Watson, dude, he's a slow starter. If you look at all of his career, if you look at his career from beginning to end, he's always been a slow starter. And I think he's going to start figuring it out. Losing Nick Chubb was horrifying. That injury, by the way, is one of the nastiest injuries ever. And the fact that he might have only torn his MCL is
that's crazy.
How? So that's a good thing, I guess, in the long run. I am very worried still about the kind of like with Jack Conklin going down too, and DeJuan Jones, he's awesome, but he's so raw that worries me a little bit at right tackle. And then also just some of these other things from, just dealing with the little things here and there. The run game. We had like 50 rushing yards against the Titans. Like, we have to have more than that. But were you impressed on how they stopped Derrick Henry?
Yeah, because I don't really know how you do that. And somehow the Browns figured it out. And to this day, I'm not exactly sure I know how.
He had negative 9 yards at halftime.
That's crazy. I mean, I know how part of it is you triple team Myles Garrett, and then you let the other players that are also very talented, like you said, make some plays. And the Tennessee passing attack is pretty
horrendous.
Pretty rough.
Horrendous.
So,
and why is Hopkins there? Why is Hopkins there? He could have went to Kansas City and had
the real question is, why did I draft DeAndre Hopkins in fantasy football?
That's because, Aaron, we see you're drafting. I did beat you in fantasy college football, so
was that this week? Because I'll be honest, I completely forgot to update my life.
It was not this week. I beat someone else this week. I beat
you. Well, then you beat me fair and square. Then
I did beat you fair and square.
Yeah.
So I look at the Browns, man. So give me your thoughts on the Browns. Do you see the Browns winning this division? Yes or no?
I don't, because I don't know if you can truly survive a Nick Chubb injury for that length of time.
Yeah, of course.
And I mean, Cincinnati, it wasn't a great performance on Monday night, but it was a win. It kept them relevant.
They look rough. They do look rough.
They look rough. And I do think a lot of that is Joe Burrow just didn't practice. There's not a lot of rhythm. And I know these are guys that he's played with for a long time now, but it's a game of repetition.
And they don't play their starters in preseason. They don't play their stars in preseason.
Correct.
They refuse.
So I think there's just some growing pains there. That defense, though, for Cincinnati was really impressive. Yeah. And really, that was Cincinnati goes 0-3, they're done.
Yeah.
Like, in my mind, they're done. And that's just statistically true. I don't believe there's ever been an 0-3 team that's made the playoffs. So statistically, you're done. Your season's over. Minnesota, sorry. You're now closer to trading Kirk Cousins than you are to actually making the playoffs. That's just the reality of the situation. So that was a survival game. They found a way to do it. And I know Cleveland obviously has their number, which I don't know how, but they do. So in terms of that actual matchup, good for Cleveland. Long term, I think Baltimore is 2-1 and probably should be 3-0.
That, by the way, that's who the Browns play this week. It's Baltimore versus the Browns. And as we claim as Browns fans, Baltimore, technically, we have a Super Bowl because of Baltimore, because technically they stole our team.
Yeah,
that's just what we say.
I have no arguments with that.
Yeah,
with that line of thinking.
And I don't think the Steelers. People are like, Steelers are 2-1. I'm like, guys, let's calm down. Let's be realistic here. That offense is not going to keep them in many games. That defense is good. TJ Watt is phenomenal. He's out of this world. But that's going to be something else. But to finish today's show, I think it's only relevant because we have two Ohio State fans here, and it's fun to talk about. What are you look back at all your times watching Ohio State football, which is a very long time for both of us. We've been on this earth for almost 30 years now. I know we're getting old, Aaron. What is your favorite Ohio State football memory in a specific game? So, like maybe the Notre Dame game here at this end part. Give me your top three of going back and looking. Your top three. We'd like to do these. It's fun, guys. You can give us in the comments too. Let us know in the comments. But go number 3 for you. What's number 3 for you? We'll go 3. I'll go 3, and then we'll finish at the top.
Yeah. Okay. Oh goodness. I think 3 has to be the Zeke Elliott run through the South against Alabama.
That call is phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, everything about that, because yes, we won a national championship that year. And obviously that should be the highlight. It's not on my top 3, actually, that game against Oregon. Yeah. And maybe this means this is a bad ranking, but I just didn't at the time. I think Alabama had so broken my brain by all of the national championships they had won and all the success that they had that I just didn't see. And that was before we really knew, like, all right, how good is this Ohio State team under Urban Meyer? Like, you thought it was going to be pretty good, but you were finally kind of really testing this out for the first time. And I mean, that run sealed the deal. It accomplished what I didn't think was possible to beat Alabama. So I was at my grandparents watching the game. I remember exactly what seat I was sitting in. I remember everything about it. That's got to be number 3.
Number 3 for me, which by the way, great one. It will be on my list. Don't worry. That was also on my list because I still remember where I was in a beanbag chair, very anxious. Number 3 for me is one that I think it's not really a play. It's a series. Would be the JT Barrett comeback against Penn State. I believe it's 2017. If you don't know, this is when I think High State was down. I think 27 to 14.
Something like that.
It was they were in a specific spot, but I remember I was at my brother's state playoff game for soccer. That's the only, I don't understand how I remember this, but I was in the stands and I was, terrible service. So I'm trying to watch the game on my phone, and he passed, I think it was 10 completions in a row or 12 completions in a row, something like that. And that pass to Marcus Ball across the middle of the field over a dude's hand and placed in the back of the end zone to win that game. To me, is maybe it wasn't a big game. Maybe it wasn't a game that was like a national title winner. To me, was just a legit awesome game to watch. And the ending the black jerseys, which by the way, still one of my favorite jerseys the High State's ever wore. I still remember that game specifically. I remember where I was. I remember I cared more about that game probably than my brother's soccer game. Sorry, Jared. I was just very focused on that game. But to me, that was my third memory.
All right, I'm going a little off script with number 2, but it's because I had a chance to be at Ohio Stadium this day. Well, can I cheat? Can I do 2A and 2B? I usually cheat when I come on this show.
Yeah, you do.
Right.
You do. Yeah,
they're both. Yeah, they're both last second wins.
Mm-hmm.
The one is way back in 2009. It's Terrell Pryor's first year. The Buckeyes at this time had already had 2 losses. The only thing they were playing for is a Big Ten championship, and they had number 10 Iowa on the ropes, tie game going into overtime.
Okay.
And they got a last second field goal on November 14th, 2009. And it was great because it was a last second field goal to clinch.
Who was this? Who was the kicker?
I want to say it was Aaron Petrie, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it wasn't Aaron Petrie, or it was the guy that played for the Crew, right? He played for the Columbus Crew.
Sorry, Devin Barclay.
Devin Barclay, that's who it was. Yes. He played for the Crew.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I know that. I don't know how I know that. That's weird.
So, yeah, that kind of clinched the Big Ten championship. It clinched a Rose Bowl, which we obviously eventually beat against Oregon. But that one was amazing because it was a game winner. The crowd went nuts. But it was November 14th. The weather, 60s. Beautiful. Impossible for Ohio. Yet it happened. And then 2A is Ohio State beating Michigan in double overtime.
Oh,
Curtis Samuel
crossing the line with his arms open.
Yep. That's hard to beat. So
the crooked line that,
yes,
Jim Harbaugh.
Of course. Throwing the clipboard, getting that 15-yard penalty. Got to watch it with Josh. It was really cool for a variety of different reasons. But in that moment, amazing.
So number 2 for me is the one that, screw it, I'm doing 2A and 2B. I can't be up. I can't be up Sean on my own show. No, 2B would be the run you said. I remember Zeke Elliott running like that. And that was the first time I could look at my friends at school and go, you see, Ohio State has the speed of the South. That was the first time I think that's the first time a lot of SEC fans looked at a team north of the Mississippi, really, or sorry, east of the Mississippi, but north of Kentucky. Let's just say that could match them in speed, physicalness. Wow, that's not even a word.
Yep,
being physical.
It is now.
There we go. It is now. So yeah, that to me, that call, by the way, the call was beautiful. And then number 2, and I'm going to get a lot of flack
on that, by the way, real quick. If you go back to the Ohio State Florida national championship, it's so funny because the narrative in that game was, oh my gosh, can Florida keep up with Ohio State's speed?
Exactly.
And that's when it flipped. And that's like the first time, like you said, that it flipped the other way. Where it's like, Ohio State.
Some other team can do it.
Yep.
And now this one I'm going to get probably more flack than even my 3 or my 2B. My 2A is, let's just be honest, the Big Ten championship game with Cardale Jones in that championship season. So it's the same season. The calls by Gus Johnson, phenomenal. Like that shouldn't be a memory for Ohio State fans, but it is. It just sticks with us, right? Shotgun, Cardale Jones, But for me, that game was the first game where I saw Ohio State truly dominate a team. I ever watched. Like, I'd watch games where they won a national title in 2002. I'd watch games where they won Big Ten championships, where Rose Bowls. This is the first time I watched a game and went, this team is legit that much better than that other team. And remember, this was going into this game, we were like at 6. There wasn't a guarantee we make the playoff. And then we squeak it in. TCU fans are mad. We squeak it in. We win a national title. Part of the best season ever. So those are 2 of the same season, but that for me is to be. What is number 1 for you? And I'm interested to see where you go with this because you've been interested so far.
Yeah, number 1 is 2002 national championship. I was 6 years old, but I still remember that game like super vividly.
Stayed way past our bedtime.
Yeah, way past my bedtime. I remember my whole family celebrating when Ohio State won in double overtime. My younger brother, who was 3 at the time, we woke him up. He started crying. It was great.
Yeah.
I mean, at that, especially like I was so naive at 6 too. Like, this was my first season watching Ohio State football. I just assumed that Ohio State won the championship every year. Yeah. It was a great place to be. Like, this team never loses. This is amazing. And then Wisconsin beat us in 2003, and that kind of ended that big long win streak. But I mean, that's really, I think, the moment, if anything, that I point to just my overall love of sports. Like, not just Ohio State, not just college football, but this all-encompassing love for sports, I think, was kind of born.
And where Fifth and Goal really was born in that mind of yours way back then, maybe.
Yep.
Started it. But I'm going to have to agree with you. Aaron, it was so sad that we both, no, I'm just kidding. No, it's funny that we both ended on this, but I think for all Buckeyes fans, maybe not for my dad and, for our parents, that maybe another time's bigger than this. But for me, it's that 2002 national title game. Like you said, man, I remember exactly where I was. I was at my aunt's house. I was stayed way up too late. I was up way too late. I remember actually going to school the next day and like almost falling asleep in class. But the biggest thing for me was that game really solidified the reason I loved Ohio State football. Like, at that point, I had pictures. Obviously, I've seen pictures of me with Ohio State gear and everything like that. But I look back now and I've rewatched that game many times since. And every time I watch it, I replayed in my head where I was, what's going on. And to be honest, like, I really hope that this season for Ohio State is like that, where we have that really kind of crazy regular season, but an epic, end to the season, and we win a national title, of course. But I'll agree with you, man. Like, my love of sports just grew with that. It grew it even grew in 2016 when Cleveland Cavaliers won a NBA championship. Things grow when things of your teams happen, right? And you love the sports even more. So those are our memories. Obviously, Aaron and I have been around the block. I mean, we're not like old. Geez, I'm talking like we're 75.
I mean, I play pickleball now for fun. So
just, oh Lord, help us all. Help us all. Dude, pickleball's not really that big here. And like, I saw someone playing pickleball and everyone's making fun of them. I'm like, guys, if you go to the States right now,
it's so fun,
so popular. Yeah. Your fun fact of the day is that the first Hungarian American football player, so a Hungarian that's full Hungarian, he's the first Hungarian ever to make a Division I team. He just signed a scholarship to go play for Maine Black Bears. Good old Maine Black Bears. And actually their second Hungarian athlete. They have one on their basketball team as well. So Hungary is representing
recruiting pipeline.
See, the Cowbells one day will have a player. That's my goal as a developer. But maybe one day we can fly Aaron over, him and Johnny, to cover a Budapest Cowbells game.
Hey,
actually, I thought about it because you guys have weird topics. Just so you know, I thought about sending you guys film of one of our games, and then you guys have to like talk about it and tell me and tell the audience how different American football is in Europe. Because that would be.
Is it like different rules or just kind of?
No, it's just. Imagine a bunch of kids that are learning, but they've played different sports, or you have like a 42-year-old offensive lineman, a 42-year-old linebacker.
Is that where all the kickers come from?
Dude, we actually have really good kickers and punters. Like, legit can kick a ball pretty far. So, but anyways, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Josh and I appreciate you filling in for Josh, and carrying on the legacy of Aaron showing up at the college football time. It feels like he always comes. College football, college basketball. It's one of the two, but our Reds maybe will be in the playoffs. So maybe Aaron and I will have a little bit more excitement to talk about in the future when he comes. I
hope so.
Maybe. And hopefully
a miracle.
Hey, hopefully Aaron wants to come back. Sometimes we scare guests away. Of course. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Awesome being here.
And so for all of you listening, if you want to listen and follow us on YouTube, go ahead and click that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We actually have a bonus episode coming out, I think this weekend or early next week, of my dad. I think no, that one already came out. It'd be just of Josh and I in America. Fun fact, Aaron, we recorded some episodes together when I was in America. That never thought that would ever happen.
It hasn't happened for us either. So good for you guys.
We beat you, and I'm 6,000 miles away.
I know, that's pretty crazy.
That's sad,
Yep.
man. That's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, we should just once I'm in there, like once I go back, we should all just get together and just do one big video. That's what we should do.
Yep.
But also, if you like it on Spotify, go ahead and click that share button, I guess. Yeah, share it, favorite it, star it, like it.
Yep.
And as while you're on there, head on over to Fifth and Goal Sports. Make sure you listen to their podcast. They do a tremendous job over there. I can't say enough. I try to model some of what we do. We look at their stuff and say, hey, I want to try to do as good as you guys are doing. So I want to tip my hat to you guys. You guys are setting a bar very high for a group that just started, your magazine, like all these things. Like what you guys are doing is phenomenal. I hope you guys keep doing what you're doing. It's awesome.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that. It means a lot.
Of course. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Hey, if you watch some football this weekend, hang out with family. And as always, we'll see you next time.